quarterbacks, though, who I thought kind of popped in week one, and I've been on one of them, Sam Howell, for most of the summer just because of his situation. I think Eric Bieniemy, while Ron Rivera says some of the players don't like his style, I think that's going to be a pretty good situation with Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, and he looked pretty good in his first action. And then a guy I haven't talked about at all, Malik Cunningham, kind of comes out of nowhere for the Patriots and looks like the new Taysom Hill. What did you think of Howell and Cunningham in week one, and what do you think of their prospects this year?
Howell looks all good. I mean, good in the sense that he's probably one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the league. He probably deserves to start. And if you look at his fantasy rushing stats, or rushing stats as applicable in fantasy in college, there's something there. There's, especially in super flex leagues, playing super flex in 2 quarterback leagues, it makes fantasy football much more interesting.
Yes.
So I think there's something there. Now, the other thing we have to be aware of, I'm going to try to mention offensive line play as often as I can, Heath, because offensive line's rough. Oof, it's rough. It's rough. So we could see Sam Howell as a player who has some potential to level off, at least, again, in that top 32 quarterbacks where he deserves to start, higher than Taylor Heineke, higher than Case Keenum, who had that one good year for Minnesota. But we might not know it yet because of the offensive line. But I think that as a potential waiver wire pickup to cover a bye week or an injury, if the offensive line pulls together a little bit, like you said, we want to see what the fruits of Eric Bieniemy's labor are, the tough love that he's bringing there. So I think that it's worth monitoring, and he looks like he belongs. Malik Cunningham is really interesting. Malik Cunningham is interesting first because this is the organization that developed Julian Edelman, right? So they're open to things. They're open to players fitting in a different way than they did in college. And Malik Cunningham's been getting a lot of reps as a wide receiver, but when he came in as a quarterback, he looked like, again, it wasn't too big. Now, yeah, it's the end of the preseason game, etc. I get it. But Heath, it's not, you don't have to stretch your mind that wide to think if this team is 4-7 and Mac Jones looks like the way that Mac Jones has looked, and Bailey Zappi is still Bailey Zappi, when do you start thinking, this again, 2 quarterback superflex leagues, you have to be a step ahead of everybody when it comes to finding that quarterback. And I guess the Malik Cunningham topic, I want to emphasize to folks that during the offseason, we spent so much time staring at these depth charts. We spent so much time thinking about it that it feels static, right? It feels like everything is pretty much set and there's a narrow range of outcomes, and we're just trying to figure out where in that narrow range of outcomes. The reality is that it's more like in these wild inflection points where everything goes like incremental change, incremental change, and then woof, big swing, and it's over. And if you were on the wrong side of that swing, you just got clobbered. And if you're on the right side of that swing, you're soaring. And dynasty, as one of our topics, overarching topics here, we could be saying, well, there's no way Malik Cunningham's going to be the quarterback of the future for the Patriots. And then in the matter of like 1 week, where Mac Jones throws 3 interceptions in the first half and the Patriots are down 21-0 at the half, and they're already basically out of playoff contention, they say, well, let's see what Cunningham can do. And Cunningham lights it up in the second half. And now all of a sudden, Malik Cunningham is the quarterback, at least of the present, right? So I think just the promise he showed, and that this is an open-minded organization. And remember another thing, there was a lot of chatter of a rift, a fracture between Mac Jones and Belichick, right? And there's some talk that the ownership is forcing Mac Jones on Belichick. Now, who knows if any of this stuff is true? That we're even hearing this because it's the Patriots. Here's the one rule. Here's how you fit in the Patriot organization. Don't talk to anybody about anything, right? Don't say anything. So just that we've even heard, ooh, there was some friction. Ooh, they didn't like what Mac Jones was doing with an outside quarterback coach or whatever. Just that we're hearing that, there's some fire to that smoke. So I think we have to be open-minded to the possibilities here because Malik Cunningham is doing what we hope, what we wish for all these players. Because the NFL, one of the beautiful things about the NFL is it is still one of the last outposts of the American dream, where whatever odds you're facing, whatever everybody has said about you, if you go out and you prove you can do it, then that's all behind you. And then you look at Austin Eckler, right? Look at some of these players that had absolutely no expectations coming in. Adam Thielen was a local tryout. You know, teams get to bring in as many players as they want from their local market. You know, there are players who had no James Harrison almost made the Hall of Fame this year. He's got to get in the Hall of Fame. He was cut 4 times, you know? So yeah, let's be open to Malik Cunningham. Let's be open to lots of things that we say that's never going to happen. Guess what? Every year, lots of never happen things happen.
Speaking of the long odds, we're going to talk about the short players. Deuce Vaughn and Tank Dell, 2 of my favorite guys in rookie drafts this season. You get to that round 3, round 4 range. I just could not stop gobbling these guys up, and fantastic performances in their preseason debuts. And the response that I get on Twitter, like I share the highlights, I talk them up. And of course, the response is he's too small. He's 5'8", he's 160 pounds. He's 5'5". And I just kind of feel like both these guys have already been penalized for that. If Deuce Vaughn was 215 pounds, he would have been a first-round pick, right? The way that guy moves. He's already been penalized for that. We've already seen Tank Dell penalized for that. The way he produced at Houston, the way he gets open, if he was 6 foot tall and 190 pounds, he would have been picked in the first round. So we don't need to penalize them a second time because of their size. Are you excited about either of these guys in terms of long-term potential? And I guess which one of them are you more excited about?
I think long-term potential, probably Dell, but I think you're right to point out that players with low BMIs, players that are shorter than you need to be, thresholds are important. When I first started going out on the road to the college all-star games and being part of the draft scene, I remember one of the things that I learned was their thresholds. And some of these they're still holding, right? Like a tackle needs to have 34-inch arms, and quarterbacks 9.5-inch hands, and all these different things, right? And I think that these players were outside of the previous thresholds, but I also think the game has changed. You have more college concepts in offenses. They're spreading the field more. I like to say every team needs to have a player that can force the defense to honor the jet sweep, right? So there's a lot more room. Tutu Atwell is a player who's coming on, and obviously McVay took him in the second round. So McVay thought, hey, these players that most people would just put a line through and say too small for the NFL. Now, Dell is especially interesting. I'm going to bring in stories, of course, again, because he and CJ Stroud are buddies from the draft scene. And the word is that Stroud asked for them to take Dell. That matters. Look, when the bullets are flying out there, quarterbacks, the relationship and chemistry they have with their receivers, that matters. So I think Tank Dell has that long-term potential, working the middle of the field, especially because CJ Stroud is a quarterback that we saw within structure is fine. Outside of structure, So if Tank Dell's that first read, uncovering early in his route, so that if the offensive line, which has had a lot of injuries, is forcing him to get the ball out quickly, then I think that Tank Dell's really interesting. Deuce Vaughn is interesting because Malik Davis, who was the number 3 last year, has not seized the number 2 job. And I love Tony Pollard, and everybody should take Tony Pollard in the second round. All right. But he's never had to hold up under a large workload, the workload they're planning on giving him.
Right.
So we need to know who's up next. And again, a great story. Hey, you want to go with dad to work? Beautiful. I'm going to tear up just thinking about it. But, you know, those kinds of beginnings to a story. I would love to see the Cowboys, except for Jerry Jones, rewarded for buying into that human story. And I think, like you said, Deuce Vaughn showed that quickness and showed that he belonged. And if this trend continues, I think he's going to be the guy that you want if Tony Pollard goes down.
Well, and I think that the thing is, like, yes, Malik Davis and even Rico Dowdle, like they look more like NFL running backs, but they can't do the things Deuce Vaughn can do. The moves he makes in the open field, there's not more than 15, 20 guys that can make those kinds of moves. So like find a way, and we talked about it, like you talked about the different thresholds we used to have. Well, it used to be that guys like, honestly, probably Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields didn't get the chance to do what they did. It not very often as a guy like Josh Allen got the 2 years of really poor throwing to get a chance to develop into what he was. Like we're seeing the teams that win find a way to use the guys that have special skills that are better than everyone else. And so I do think give these guys a chance. There were 3 more running backs. One of these was one of my favorites before the preseason, really before the NFL draft. Israel Abanikanda, everything just fell apart. Let's hope that maybe he ends up on a different roster or has a chance in 2 to 3 years. But 2 other guys who popped: Chris Evans, a guy we've been waiting on for a couple of years, and Elijah Dotson. Like, are you excited about either of these guys?
Well, Dotson has to be watched because Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller, these guys have been given opportunities and not really seized the day. And Austin Eckler goes down. And even if Austin Eckler doesn't go down, there's opportunity. There's enough in that offense for there to be a second running back who has at least marginal value week to week, but certainly injury upside if Eckler goes down. So we have to watch this. Even if let's put it this way: if Dotson makes the team, I don't think Dotson will be the number 2 running back. And they just released Larry Roundtree, right? So this is a good sign for Dotson. If he makes the team, it could be one of those situations where if Eckler misses extended time, their plan A is let's go with Kelly, let's go with Spiller, but Dotson could force his way in the similar way that Jaylen Warren has for the Steelers. Nobody had Jaylen Warren at where he is with the Steelers. At this time last year, nobody had Jaylen Warren as pretty much a 1A for the Steelers. So let's keep that in mind. And remember, for Dynasty, this is a wide open situation next year. Probably they'll draft a running back, but this is a wide open situation for next year. Again, Isaiah Pacheco, right? Who had him where his value is right now at this time last year after a good camp. So I think that absolutely Dotson is somebody that we need to watch. And Evans is interesting because we know he has receiving chops. That was one of the things that he got drafted on. Then also he's at Michigan. Don't you just feel like Michigan hasn't really been showing us the best of their, like Nico Collins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, right? Like the Michigan's offensive skill players have had to overcome the perceptions about them based on how they produced and performed at Michigan. And Chris Evans was one of those guys. I think he was a highly touted recruit. I think measurables wise, physically, he's what you wanted. He just fell well into the third day because it was kind of mysterious, and COVID, the season threw things off, and just lost a lot of momentum, I think, in his career. But now you're seeing him potentially emerge with Travion Williams banged up. Chase Brown is interesting, although I don't know at this early juncture of his career that he's a running back that the team's going to trust. Right. So we just want to know if Joe Mixon goes down, who's the guy? Because much like the Chargers offense, the Bengals offense is going to just produce running back numbers as residue of them going up and down the field and scoring points. Doesn't even matter how good the running back is. So the next in line is important. It looks like right now that's Evans.
We've got some wide receivers who popped in. One that I saw, like we've already talked about Tank Dell, but I was watching, of course, that Saints-Chiefs game.
Yeah.
And man, A.T. Perry comes onto the field with Jameis Winston. And it's like, wait, he should have been playing with the other guys. He should have been playing with the first team, just absolutely destroying anybody who was trying to cover him. And we know Michael Thomas's injury history. I'm not sure there's anybody else other than Chris Olave who's definitely ahead of Perry. This was a guy who had a little bit of steam before the draft as well. You know the Saints as well as anybody except for maybe the Steelers. So how do you feel about Perry?
Yeah, I think mentioning Michael Thomas in the same breath is important because, like you said, it's like Michael Thomas, at least he got paid before all this happened. Because I don't want to poke fun, like what's the pool? What do you have week 5? I've got week 4. That's going to be the season-ending injury. But once something happens a few times, we have to say it's more likely that it continues to happen than it doesn't. The trend reverses. When they picked up Perry, I thought, and again, Perry is a guy, if you go back to pre-draft evaluations, he was considered, a mid-round pick, a 3rd to 5th round pick. He did not end up there. That doesn't mean that everybody who evaluated him as at least an NFL contributor, if not more, was wrong. And his game maps to Michael Thomas's game very well. So I think that's the other thing, that if there's a role in the offense for a player with a big wingspan, a player that can win contested balls in short and intermediate zone, Perry is that guy.